So Tim, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership.
Pleasure. Totally my pleasure, Dr. Nick.
Before we walk into the future, Tim, can you please tell us a little bit about your background? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, sure. Well, the home for me at the moment is Reigate in Surrey. I'm about 15 minutes from Gatwick Airport, so that's where I'm based. But in terms of where I grew up, I grew up in South London. My parents moved about a little bit when I was a youngster. Father was a microbiologist. Mother was a nurse. So a very interesting background with them constantly being called out to one emergency or other.
Right. And tell us, Tim, what was your dream career when you grew up?
Yeah, so I don't know if this is a common thing for young boys, but I always dreamed of being a pilot. I don't know if it's the sense of freedom, but it probably tracks back to just that first experience on a plane, the roar of the engine, the speed of the takeoff, and I'll tell you something. It may or may not be funny, but when I was young, I always found koala bears cute. And I had this crazy idea that I was going to become a pilot and fly to Australia and spend time with the koala bears.
Oh, it's never too late, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. I've not been to Australia yet, so we need to add that one to the travel list.
Right. So Tim, today you are piloting the business of business, if I may say so, and you're delivering strategic business plans through your proprietary coaching system. Can you tell us a little bit about how does a PX, executive business coaching, work?
The five PX system, yeah. So the 5PX system is a process that I devised. It stands for the 5 paths to excellence, and it's a framework that we go through with clients, looking at the areas that we find make the biggest difference in business. So we look at document excellence. So that that's effectively your internal systems and workflows. We look at operational excellence. We look at customer service excellence. We look at marketing excellence and innovation excellence. And we find that when you combine these 5 things in a highly effective way, you tend to get a very, very effective business.
Now, Tim, looking back at your early days, can you tell us who inspired you? Who inspired you to reach for the stars?
Yeah, so I think, to be fair, my inspiration to reach for the stars probably came from reading Napoleon Hill's book, The Laws of Success, closely followed by a few audio tracks from Jim Rohn. But I found it particularly fascinating, just Napoleon Hill's take on things, and it left me with a sense that actually the life that we lead can be engineered to a large degree. And I'm a big proponent of the sort of you make your own success mindset, and I think for me that's where it all started.
Okay, and looking back over your career, Tim, was there a major turning point, or maybe a number of turning points where things could have gone different?
There probably a number of turning points. Our careers, particularly with my corporate background, the career is quite a colourful one. But I think about this actually from time to time. The turning point for me was when I sat down in my corporate office and I wanted to reflect on where have I derived my job satisfaction from, and it boiled down to those simple knocks on the door. Tim, have you got, from one colleague after the next, Tim, have you got 5 minutes? Tim, we're not sure how to do this. Can you just take a look? Can you just help? We just need you to approve. So I think I fell in love without knowing with just helping people. And I think that's a huge part of now what I do today. But it all started from that recognition.
So helping people to navigate their business strategically, would you say that is what's driving you today, Tim?
Well, it's a bit of a cop out in the sense that probably my primary driver, which is common for most, is family. You know, I'm fortunate enough to have 2 young, beautiful children and a loving wife. So that's my primary focus, followed by other key relationships. I've made some good friends. Fortunate enough to have an extensive network of contacts, and I've met some really good people along the way. So that actually drives me, and I'm always self-motivated. Always been a self-motivated individual, so I'm one that is wired to look for continual improvements. So I'm a bit of a self-starter in that sense. I don't really need too much more to drive me.
So Tim, as a leader of leaders in the world of business, what does the future of leadership and leading in business mean to you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for me, leading in business is all about being prepared to get your hands dirty. You know, we often hear that age-old saying, you shouldn't ask individuals to do things that you're not prepared to do yourself. It's a bit of a cliche, but I do think leading by example plays a huge part in terms of empowering others, because others are influenced by what we do. So we've got to set that example, but we also have to give people the breathing space to learn. I think particularly business in the current climate is a highly pressurized environment. It's easy to fall into the temptation to make quick, rash decisions. I think it's about being pragmatic. It's about having good data at your fingertips and making sure that you are taking decisions that is in some way, shape or form grounded in an evidence base.
Right. And Tim, what have you learned from your own journey that you would consider most important for building future leaders, especially future leaders in business?
Yeah, so patience, I think, patience is a virtue. I kind of feel like in no environment is that patience greater tested than that of running your own business and managing everything that goes behind the scenes. How do I maintain patience? I try, like every business owner, it's difficult, but I try to get sufficient sleep. I try to get sufficient exercise where I can. I know you've been spying on my LinkedIn profile, so you're aware of that. I think it's about having a balanced life. As difficult as that is, and as easy as it is to say, I think that's probably one of the real challenges that every leader needs to overcome, and sooner rather than later, because burnout has a habit of spiraling downwards, and things can go from bad to worse quite quickly.
Right. And Tim, what is your advice for future business leaders about social media? How should they navigate social media to build their own brand?
Yeah, so this is another good question, because aside from your modern day business leader, I think there's still a number of people that have been in business for quite some time that resist social media, and I think there's an opportunity ultimately that's being missed. Social media is not a catch-all. It isn't the case that a business needs to put themselves on every platform that comes to market, but The fact of the matter is, on the platform that's right for you, there is an audience there to be leveraged. And if you're not the right person in your business to take that forward, then find the person who is, or find someone externally that can help with that. But there is an extent to which I think business is being left on the table if one does not take the time to at least look into how social media might help their business.
Now, Tim, these are challenging times. And what is your advice for future business leaders? What are some of the biggest challenges they should expect to encounter and hopefully overcome in their career?
Yeah, let me answer that question from the perspective of a business owner. I think one of the biggest challenges that we've got, I guess for those industries that it relates to, is the remote working. And the extent to which some businesses are now trying to figure out how best to tackle the mediocre performance, perhaps from individuals that were absolutely brilliant before the pandemic and before these sort of changes that we're seeing now. Individuals that, when they were in the office working under supervision, were really in their element and they were able to flourish, who probably for quite legitimate and fair reasons just don't self-regulate very well when working remotely. So that's an interesting challenge. It presents a challenge with regards to whether or not those businesses are going to have some difficult decisions to make in future. I'd like to suggest that a solution mindset is probably what's needed, in the sense, how can those individuals be upskilled? How can they be supported? How can the business shift to ensure that those changes don't adversely impact who were previously good people and still are good people, but we just need to help them work in a different way. Alongside that challenge, when you think of this, this Zoom world, this video conferencing world, I think the speed at which technology is changing is almost mind-blowing these days. And I think the average business is struggling to keep on top of day-to-day operations, let alone all of these changes. So I think increasingly in the future, we will need to be more agile. I think, coming back to the way you phrased the question, the internal leader within an organization, so who perhaps isn't the business owner, equally is going to need to be more agile in their mindset. They're going to need to appreciate all of the points that I just raised. It's definitely not going to be a one-size-fits-all environment for an industry, for an employee, from one employee to the next. So that could be uncomfortable for many leaders, but it's here. It's upon us. So we just need to be perhaps a bit more creative at finding solutions to match a world that seems to be changing at 10 times the speed around us.
Right. And Tim, if you were to design a curriculum for future business leaders, future business owners, what are some of the new skills you would want to factor in?
Yeah, so for me, actually, this ties in nicely with 5PX, and one of our focuses being innovation excellence, because I think there's still an extent to which businesses are not paying attention, or enough attention. And obviously, this comment doesn't cover every business, but there's still too many businesses that are not paying enough attention to future opportunities and future changes, either in their marketplace or otherwise. So I think paying attention to disruptive technologies is big, and that for sure would need to be part of the curriculum. What currently seems in the news like a lot of hype and application of blockchain technologies, and all of these things that are steadily moving forward in the background, I think is just one example of what leaders need to be mindful of. And when we talk about disruptive technology, these things are either going to represent a huge opportunity for some going forward, or they're really going to jeopardize existing sales lines and sales channels. And so people need to be prepared for those sorts of things.
Right. And Tim, as a mentor to future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
Yeah, I always like to go with the simple stories. We work with a number of different businesses. We specialize in those businesses that work in and around sort of professional services, but we also do a lot with commercial trade companies as well. But totally aside from those two directions, we were working with a restaurant just before the pandemic, who again had only been going a year, but came to us for assistance to sort of grow and extend the business. And then shortly after they engaged us, the pandemic hit. And as it was everywhere else around the world, restaurants and places of concern were quickly shut down. And I'll never forget, the managing director came to me and said, "Tim, in these short few months, you guys have been absolutely brilliant, and I am convinced that you are the last thing we're getting rid of, because if we come through this pandemic, it will be because of..." And actually, so that was a flying endorsement before we even really had delivered much. I'm pleased to say that as a result of the work we did, they went on not only to come through the pandemic, but has since, more than doubled the size of the business, and is going very, very well indeed. So our success, and it's a cliche, our success is the client's success, but for me, it's much to do with all of the systems I mentioned at the outset. If you put the right things in place, then you're gonna get those incremental gains, and bit by bit things will move forward.
Right. And Tim, are there any role models of leadership that you would recommend future leaders should study and maybe learn from?
Yeah, there's a couple of things I want to say on that. So firstly, I'm going to go back to sort of Napoleon Hill, who I think, if you haven't read, The Law of Success, for anybody that's listening, then that's something that I'd like to encourage people to go and seek out. But Jim Rohn was an inspiration for me, as I've already said, for the reasons already given, and this whole idea actually that you carve out your own path. But I remember specifically Seth Godin, so the marketing expert. I remember seeing him in an interview once, and he was asked a question to do with the competition, and he said something along the lines of, I don't have time to pay too much attention to the competition because I'm too busy focusing on what I'm building here. And for me, that is just such an important point for people to take to heart, because I think, now that doesn't mean to say that he wasn't paying any attention to competitors or reviewing stats, but it is about charting your own way,
right?
Based on access to good data, and I think it's there's the best of the best will always tell you that it's important, just as much as you have a to-do list, it's important to have a things to stop doing or a cancellation list, and for me, this whole thing of not being distracted and just ensuring that you're somewhat tunnel visioned with appropriate breaks along the way to make sure you're not going off track, to steady the ship, as it were. I think there's something we can all take from that. Run your race and run your race well.
And Tim, how can our viewers connect with you, and where should they follow you?
Well, the best place to connect with me would be LinkedIn. Just search for Tim Hatari. That's Hatari. You should find me straight away. Alternatively, you can go to the website, which is www.tmdcoaching.co.uk. But yeah, reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn, drop me a line. Would love to hear from anyone that wants to chat.
Right. And last but not least, Tim, what is your message to the millions of kids, possibly future leaders out there who are now leaving school, who are going to enter the world of work, who are looking to start their own career? What are maybe one or two success principles they should consider?
Yeah, so for the kids, funnily enough, I would say, given that so many of them are into YouTube and TikTok and whatnot, take the time to make sure that you are also digesting content that's going to develop you personally, that's going to inspire you and encourage you to move on. All of those same platforms, aside from content that can make you laugh, is full of rich content that can really take you on in life and perhaps have you skip a few steps along the way. My last comment, though, around success would be in the words of Jim Rohn. Actually, he said in one of his talks, actually, here's the formula for success: a few simple disciplines practiced every day. So for me, that's a catch-all. I don't really need to add any more to that, other than to say, be wise with your time, make time for fun, but really do make time for learning, growth, and development, and pay attention to what's changing around you, because the assumptions that you have today may be totally irrelevant tomorrow.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership, and reminding us that in these ever-changing times, as it gets harder and harder to navigate the waters of business, there are some fundamental principles that we need to remember.
Yeah, fundamental principles. I think that's one of the reasons why I like these two guys, because a lot of what they say is really based on timeless principles.
Right. Thank you, Tim.